Hello, welcome to our first edition of Talks with Tees, our podcast. We are both family lawyers at Tees. Mark, what do you do?
So I'm a solicitor in the team at Tees. So I'm a specialist in family law. So we cover lots of areas: children, finances, divorce, all those areas.
Excellent. So I'm also a solicitor in the family team here at Tees. I tend to specialise more in the children's side of things, but I also cover finances and all other areas of family law that come our way. So a brief introduction. We have titled our podcast Talks with Tees. Have you got your cup of tea, Mark?
I've actually got water today. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
I do not like tea very much. I'm not a fan. I don't mind coffee.
Yeah.
But water is my preferred drink.
So
These tea drinkers.
Okay, so let's kick off our first topic, which is going to be Divorce Day, fact or fiction. So, Mark, what is Divorce Day? When is it?
Actually, what Divorce Day is the first Monday after the 1st of January, which in 2025 will be the 6th of January. So this is a really important day in the social media calendar, which I see, which is the typical day where people initiate a divorce, separation. But for us as practitioners, as lawyers in family law, we don't necessarily see a huge spike necessarily in January. It really just depends. But really, stereotypically, people say that this is a common day to divorce is after the busy Christmas period when there's been lots of arguments over who's cutting the turkey and whatever else. And people kind of build up all their kind of tensions and frustrations. And January's that kind of new beginning where people initiate a divorce, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I think it might be helpful for our listeners if you can just give a bit of an example of what that might look like for a client in the build up to Christmas, what we tend to see, and why there's this idea of January being Divorce Day and there being a sort of pause in the proceedings.
Absolutely. So I think let's just take a kind of typical example. So for example, Sarah and Tom, been married 12 years. So over the past few years, relationship has grown really kind of strained due to financial pressures. So Tommy got a new promotion. He's working all the hours under the sun. And Sarah, she's got a beauty salon. So she's doing all the appointments in the evenings. They've got children. And so it seems they're kind of, like ships in the night. They just kind of just pass each other. And so they've also got different parenting styles. For example, the children, like sets of sporty outfits where Sarah's not a massive keen on, and then always going out in their sports gear. Dad's very, had some pride in making sure they're all smart, etc. So there's clearly a lot of tensions. And so they went into the Christmas period with a view that actually, look, it's all positive. We've got all these presents, etc. And I think they tried to use the Christmas period as a period that were a huge kind of family time. And actually, over that Christmas period, there's a lot of strains, financial pressures, family, where are we going? Are we going to Auntie Sally's or whoever's house we're going? So by New Year's Day, Sarah found herself reflecting over the Christmas period. Actually, it was incredibly stressful. And those arguments that they were having pre-Christmas are all now coming to the surface. And so thinking about a resolution, she was thinking about going back to the gym, getting fit. Actually, what her reflection and resolution is actually on my life and prioritising her happiness and children's well-being. And having that as her priority, she then took the move on that Monday to go to the solicitor to book that first appointment, which is not as daunting as it may seem. We have an office with sofas. So make that first initial appointment not as daunting as it may seem. And actually, after that meeting, Sarah felt a huge weight lift off her shoulder. And I think that day is an example of that quite common scenario, as you would say, which we see.
So I think we are both agreed on this, spoiler alert, is that it is a myth because we don't see an influx of clients specifically on whatever the divorce day of that year might be. Yes, it's busy periods, but often that is because there's been a delay, as you spoke about, or your example, people just don't want to instigate divorce proceedings in December. So yes, it's a time when we do see more new client inquiries coming through and people feeling like it's the new year, I want to get on and do my job. But there are other periods of the year where we also see that influx. So obviously after the summer holidays in September, we always see an increase in client inquiries because people don't want to get on with things during August when children are at home and all that. So I think there are other times in the year. It's not just specifically divorce day. We also, as family solicitors, often very busy throughout the year, aren't we? So it's urgent things coming up, but there's not really a specific time when people say we'll definitely divorce. And family issues can happen at any time, can't they? As we see in our day to day. Okay, so I think we both agreed when it comes to divorce day, it's a myth. But when we were talking about this podcast, we thought about some myths, didn't we? That would be quite good to bust. So do you want to go ahead with myth?
Well, your first myth, I think, is always kind of flagged up, is divorce is always contentious.
Yeah.
So essentially what we kind of mean by that when we say contentious, i.e. litigious, confrontational, there's a lot of animosity. Now, actually, there's a huge kind of wave for our listeners actually towards this non-fault based divorce system. And actually a huge shift. Us as practitioners and our clients as well are seeing the benefit of this new buzzword NCBR, so non-court dispute resolution. And under that kind of umbrella, there's a lot more focus. And in fact, without going into our kind of legal jargon too much, but actually the judiciary, the judges and cases actually refusing to take cases if they haven't gone through the NCVR mechanisms, ways to resolve matters. So some example, just to kind of touch on that for our listeners. So mediation, which is a really topical topic at the moment, and a form of dispute resolution, which we'll come to shortly. There are other approaches as well, out of court, so roundtable meetings, early mutual evaluations, which we can talk. And certainly a solicitor will be able to advise you a little bit more detail about those. So I suppose going on to myth number 2. So over to you, Katie. So I think this one, divorce ruins families.
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. I think when people say, oh, I'm getting divorced, they just initially think, well, that's it. You know, for children, for the relatives and all of that. It absolutely does not have to be like that. So we as divorce solicitors will do what we can to ensure always the children are our focus. So we will take steps to make sure that they are protected, that they're safe, first and foremost, but also that they continue their relationship with both sides of their family, and ensure that they don't feel, as much as possible, that they don't feel like there is an issue. Obviously, their parents are getting separated. It's going to be difficult, but there are lots of networks and organisations that we can signpost the clients to help with that. So we work with lots of organisations. For example, we often work with an organisation called Kids Come First. And that really is, I think, the crux of what we do. The children come first. We need to make sure that they are always being spoken about, because, yes, it can become contentious. It can become difficult and ultimately the solicitors have to help with that, because we're the professionals. People are very emotional. They're going through a very difficult time. And so we have to continue to make sure that they're thinking about their children at a time when it's hard to, isn't it? It is really difficult.
Absolutely. I think it's easy for us as practitioners as well to kind of part the children to one side, so let's focus on the finances, because actually everything's linked. And I think it's really important to adopt that kind of collaborative process with the family. So actually we want everyone to kind of maintain those relationships and so far as we can.
Yeah. I think divorce lawyers have got a bad reputation, haven't they? From maybe the films or TV programs, that we're just out there to sort of take everything, and you know, and the reality of it is just that's just not what we're doing on a day to day. It really, really is not what we're doing. We don't want there to be litigation. We don't want there to be fighting. Obviously, sometimes we have to go to court, but we will do as much as we can to avoid that. And certainly, I think hopefully the other lawyers that we're working with, if they don't initially think like that, we can bring them around to our way of thinking.
And also, you just kind of add on to that. My own kind of personal style is to try and diffuse that word divorce as well, because that D word to most people has so many negative connotations. And I think for us, I mean, what I tend to advise my clients is to actually don't use divorce when you're talking at home to children, etc. But actually say, maybe not necessarily with children, but certainly with your other partner, is formalising our separation. Is that kind of changing the language, which us as lawyers from the outset can advise clients to actually improve those relationships at home and to try and do it in the most amicable way. So
yeah.
Great.
Okay, so final myth that we're going to talk about before we conclude. January is the only time to act in line with, obviously, what the podcast is about.
Well, I think absolutely, yeah. Well, I didn't tend to agree with that.
No.
Which is not a surprise. I think the reality is there's no perfect time. And I think there are various touch points in the year where families will understandably consult a lawyer. Yes, January is one of them. Naturally, over that heated Christmas, serving up the dinner, etc. But there are certain other touch points, and I think it's really bespoke to that individual family, and it's whenever it's right for that individual, essentially.
Absolutely.
And just to kind of finish up, you just get out right support network. So getting the friends.
Yeah.
If there's any other, there's divorce coaches out there which we can signpost, but just having that support network. I mean, we would always be in the corner for our clients, and we always work in a collaborative approach throughout the team. So the support network is key.
Yeah, great.
Thank you everyone for listening to our first ever podcast. Our next episode will be all things dry January related to child arrangements.